Good morning, AWS, and welcome to the AWS Morning Brief for Monday, August 10th, in this interminable year of our Lord, 2020. AWS had a relatively light week last week, because most of the releases they did were nonsense that aren't worth going into. But before I get into that, this episode is sponsored in part by our friends at New Relic, which sounds more like something from the past, almost an old relic, if you will, except that they recently changed a whole bunch of things. They fundamentally reworked everything that they'd done. They have gone open source, they've unified their various confusing product offerings into a single thing, and they fixed their pricing, by which I mean that they made it A, simpler, and B, usage-based as opposed to playing the contract game. For an added bonus, they even wound up throwing in a free tier with one user and 100 gigabytes of data per month, which means even with your crappy logging practices, you probably fit into that. So give it a try. You don't have to deal with salespeople. Visit newrelic.com and see what happens. I'm pleasantly surprised by this. Check it out. Now, what happened last week at AWS? Let's find out. Code Guru Reviewer now has full repository analysis support. Yes, that's right. Code Guru will charge you per line of code in whatever repository you pointed at. But don't worry, you're going to get a 20% discount on everything over your first $15,000 a month in Code Guru charges. I'm not kidding. New AWS Solutions Consulting offer, VPC in a box. A company with vision, a sense of humor, and a larger marketing budget than a small child's weekly allowance would have launched VPC in a box with a Justin Timberlake / Andy Samberg music video. If nothing else, I know what my next parody song is going to be. Register for AWS Container Day to learn about Kubernetes, EKS, Fargate, BottleRocket, and more. There are many things to appreciate about AWS Container Day in 1 week from today, no matter who you are. For me, the thing I appreciate the most is the blog post that lists a full agenda for their worldwide online event without bothering to tell anyone what time zone it's in. Automating cross-account actions with an AWS CDK credential plugin. When even their vaunted CDK needs a special plugin to be able to speak cross-account, I give up. Optimizing the cost of running AWS Elastic Beanstalk workloads. Whereas you can optimize the entire experience of running AWS Elastic Beanstalk workloads by migrating them all to Heroku instead. Reach more players using AWS Global Accelerator. Remember, for AWS services, don't hate the player, hate the name. This episode is also sponsored by Chaos Search. I've talked about Chaos Search before. You know who they are. They wind up providing a drop-in replacement for your terrible Elk stack that not only saves you infrastructure money, but also in engineering time and replacing the engineers who rage quit after having to deal with one too many Elasticsearch's nonsense. If you're processing hundreds of gigabytes a day or multiple petabytes a day, Chaos Search is for you. Check them out at chaossearch.io, and my thanks to them, as always, for their support of this ridiculous podcast. Verizon and AWS deliver mobile edge computing to customers in Boston and the Bay Area. Some of the worst conspiracy theorists in the freaking world are going to come out of the woodwork for AWS's 5G offering instead of focusing on the real problem, which is the terrible US-West-2-WL1-SFO-WLZ-1 name for my local San Francisco wavelength zone. 5G's higher throughput is apparently necessary to get its complete name out to customers in a reasonable time frame. Building a Pictionary-style game with AWS Deep Lens and Amazon Alexa. This post features some hilariously bad drawings that, whoops, those are the AWS service icons. My bad. Unbox and start streaming live video with AWS Elemental Link. If you work hard enough at online video streaming, maybe you can one day produce events as awesome as AWS's online summits, which are now for Amazon EC2 Instance Port Forwarding with AWS Systems Manager. Security folks rejoice everywhere with the resounding, wait, Systems Manager can do what now? But that means our compliance attestations. Oh no. Building a cloud-ready workforce. Utah announces plan to train and certify 5,000 residents in cloud computing. Look, while I am a huge fan of better vocational training programs, I'm honestly not sure that using public funds to pay for vendor-specific training offerings from that vendor to, in turn, promote that vendor is the best way to get there. Migrating your rules from AWS WAF Classic to the new AWS WAF. My preferred approach is just not to migrate the WAF rules at all. If AWS wants me to move, they'll eventually get so tired of sending me emails about it that they'll offer to do just about anything to get me to do it themselves. They'll even move them for free. We call that their opening negotiating position. Secure deployment of Amazon SageMaker resources. You can tell that AWS's security story is improving because this post only includes 6 additional AWS services beyond SageMaker itself. And lastly, cross-account bulk transfer of files using Amazon S3 batch operations. This is exactly what I've been looking for in order to shove those 2 exabytes of data into that S3 bucket that you've forgotten to secure. I bet you'll remember after that monthly bill shows up. And that's what happened last week in AWS. Thanks to sponsors New Relic and Chaos Search for supporting this ridiculous podcast. And if you've enjoyed it, please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Whereas if you've hated it, please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and come up with a worse name for VPC in a box in the comments.
This has been a Humble Pod production. Stay humble.